It was the oldest story in the book, the kind you hear about but never think will happen to you. I mean, what are the odds? The husband walks in way earlier than anyone expected, only to catch his wife in bed with another man. And not just any guy, my best friend. Honestly, I never thought something like that could happen to me. Dorothy and I loved each other. At least, that's what I believed. That morning had started off better than I could have imagined. I just wrapped up a big project that I'd been working on for almost half a year, and the client signed off without hesitation. Suddenly, I was the company's golden boy. They said I'd nearly tripled our revenue, so folks kept stopping by my office to pat me on the back. By 10:30, I'd finished all my paperwork and dropped the whole package on my boss's desk. He was so happy he started talking about a promotion and a big bonus, then told me to take the rest of the week off. He actually joked, "Go home and chase Dolores around the house." I couldn't help but grin. Truth be told, I loved chasing Dolores, especially because of what came after. Driving home, all I could think about was how lucky I was. My wife was beautiful, smart, and, as far as I knew, crazy about me. We had 3 wonderful daughters I adored, and I honestly liked my job. I kept thinking life couldn't get much better. But as soon as I pulled into the driveway, I noticed Dan's old station wagon parked there. Dan had been my closest friend since we were kids in 6th grade. He'd stood by my side at my wedding, and I was the best man at his. His wife Melissa and Dolores hit it off, too. They went shopping together and loved their girls' nights out. I figured today must have been another one of those days, and just like that, my hope of a little alone time with Dolores vanished. Turns out, Melissa wasn't the one who had plans with Dolores that day. The second I walked in the door, I didn't even have time to call out my usual, "Honey, I'm home," before I heard Dolores upstairs. She was calling out for Dan. The things she said, the things he said back, I just froze where I stood. I always thought of myself as a level-headed guy. So instead of running up there and making a scene, I just stood there in shock. Both my wife and my best friend had let me down in the worst way. Yelling and throwing a punch or two wouldn't cut it. So I quietly turned around and walked out, with their voices echoing in my mind. I didn't know exactly how I'd get back at them, but I knew I would, and they'd never see it coming. Plus, after leaving the house, I pulled over a few blocks away and just sat there, letting everything sink in. The more I thought about it, the more I realized I needed to know the whole story before making any moves. By 3 that afternoon, I was sitting in the office of Sam Hines, a private investigator. I told Sam everything, signed some paperwork so he could legally check things out at my place, paid him a retainer, and left. My next stop was a jewelry store. I bought a diamond pendant, not because I wanted to give Dolores a gift, but to cover my tracks. If my boss had called home asking about work and Dolores started getting suspicious, I could just say I'd spent hours hunting for the perfect piece of jewelry for her. After all, no one expects a husband who's on to his wife to buy her a fancy diamond. I even made sure I could return it if she didn't like it. With that done, I headed home. Plus, acting like nothing had happened was one of the toughest things I've ever had to do. Pretending to be the loving husband, giving her hugs and kisses, it all felt like a performance. Strangely, though, our physical relationship didn't really change. If anything, it got even more intense. I guess, in a weird way, it was thrilling, knowing the truth about Dolores. Looking back, our sex life had always been strong. There was never any hint she might be seeing someone else. Still, I found myself wondering how long I'd been the last in line after Dan. It was just an expression, of course. Dolores was careful enough to clean up after herself. But still, I couldn't help but wonder how often Dan had been there before me. When I finally got the answer, it knocked the wind out of me. Plus, it was about 3 weeks after I found out my wife had been unfaithful that I got the report back from the private investigator. He told me, "Looks like this affair has been going on for quite a while. From what I can tell, it's been happening for at least 8 years. I need to warn you, the audio and video evidence I've collected is going to be tough to handle. If you want my advice, destroy the tapes without watching or listening to them. Take my written report to your lawyer. That alone should be enough to get you a good outcome in a divorce. I can't stop you from looking at the tapes, they're yours, after all, but I strongly suggest you don't." But you know how human nature is. After hearing that warning, there was no way I wasn't going to see for myself, even if it might hurt. Looking back now, I realize I really should have listened to his advice and left those tapes alone. The tapes included phone calls between Dolores and Dan, full of "I love yous," "I miss yous," and talk about when they'd meet up next. The video recordings were mostly just the two of them together, being intimate, even doing things I'd never experienced with Dolores myself. For example, Dolores and I had tried certain things when we first got married, but she'd eventually told me it was too uncomfortable for her and asked if we could stop. Our regular life together was always good, so I never pushed for more. It never seemed like a big sacrifice. But seeing her doing those very things enthusiastically with Dan was a punch to the gut. There were even moments on tape where she asked for them. It was like she was someone else entirely. I sat through about 12 hours of footage before I reached the one tape the detective knew would be the hardest for me to watch. This particular tape was from the first night of my last business trip. It started like the others, but this time I had to watch as Dolores and Dan spent the night together, clearly making the most of the time with me away. Later, after things calmed down, Dolores asked Dan if he was going to stay the night since I wasn't home, and he said that was his plan. She asked him, "How do you get away with this with Melissa?" Dan said, "I usually just start an argument with her. Sooner or later she says something, I pretend I'm mad, and storm out. The next day, I tell her I crashed at my office. She might check on me, but I always say I don't answer the phone after hours, and if I wanted to talk to her, I'd have stayed home. It's all part of the plan for when I'm ready to get divorced." Dolores wanted to wait a while, at least until the girls got a bit older. Dan pushed back, saying that the longer they waited, the tougher it'd be to break the news to the kids, that he was really their father. Dolores said, "Maybe we just don't tell them, or maybe wait and quietly file adoption papers so you can be their legal dad." But Dan wanted more. "They're my kids, and I want to acknowledge them." Dolores worried that telling the truth would just cause a huge fight over child support with me, especially if I ever found out the kids weren't really mine. Dan suggested if I ever brought it up, she could just say it was all to make things easier on the kids when the move happened. Dolores was worried that if I insisted on a DNA test, I'd learn not just the truth about the kids, but also how long this had all been going on, and that would only make things worse. In the end, Dolores tried to reassure him. She said, "It'll be all right. You'll be with them, being their dad, and over time, they'll see you that way." Then, not missing a beat, she reached for him, ready to start all over again. I sat there, completely stunned, trying to process what I'd just heard. Could it really be true that my 3 girls weren't mine, but Dan's? That meant Dolores and Dan had been betraying me for as long as I could remember. Veronica, my oldest, was almost 10. If you count back 9 months for the pregnancy, that meant they'd been going behind my back for at least 11 of my 12 years of marriage. I kept asking myself how on earth this could have happened right under my nose. How could they have been carrying on all these years without me suspecting a thing? Was I so blinded by love that I just refused to see it? Well, that blindness was gone now. And honestly, it was probably a good thing neither of them was anywhere near me, because in that moment, the anger was so intense I might have done something I'd regret forever. By the time I faced Dolores, that rage would pass. I was always the patient type, and I decided I'd take my time and make sure both Dan and Dolores faced consequences for what they'd done. Plus, I didn't do any of the things you'd expect in a story like this. I didn't cancel credit cards, close out accounts, or hide money. I acted like nothing was wrong, so Dolores wouldn't suspect a thing. But in my mind, I was already planning how I'd get even. One thing I knew for sure, there was no way on earth Dan was ever going to live in my house. My first step was to make copies of all the evidence the detective had collected, and then I rented a safe deposit box to keep it secure. After a few days of thinking things through, I came up with a plan. The first part was to nudge Dolores into making a move. I knew she always went through pockets before doing laundry, so I left the receipt for the diamond pendant in the pocket of one of my shirts and tossed it in the laundry basket. She usually did laundry on Saturdays, but I figured she wouldn't mention it right away. She'd see the receipt, assume I'd bought her a gift, and wait for me to surprise her. Next, I started coming home late on nights when I normally wouldn't. I stopped by a drugstore and bought some perfume and lipstick, nothing like what Dolores wore, and put just a little bit on the collar of my suit. The goal was to make her think I was seeing someone else, to get her to confront me first. I wanted her to feel like she had the upper hand, so she'd relax and let her guard down. That way, when the truth came out, she'd be completely unprepared. It took 5 weeks, but eventually, she called me out. I walked in late one evening to find her waiting up for me. "Hi, honey. I thought you'd be in bed," I said. "I stayed up, Robert. We need to talk," she replied. "Can it wait until morning? I'm wiped out." "No, it can't. I want some answers. Your late nights, the strange perfume on your clothes, lipstick I don't own on your collar, and this," she said, sliding the pendant receipt across the table. I picked it up and asked, "Where'd you find this?" "In your shirt pocket, while I was doing laundry." I shrugged. Guess that was careless of me. Careless? That's all you've got to say? What else do you want from me? Robert, are you seeing another woman? To tell you the truth, yeah, I am. She exploded. You rotten, miserable man. How could you do this to me? Hold on, let's not act like saints here. You've been seeing someone else for a couple of years yourself. So if you can cheat, why can't I? You're accusing me of cheating? No, Dolores, I'm just stating the facts. One day I came home early and, before I even stepped in, I heard you and Dan upstairs together. It's a good thing I was in a decent mood that day, because otherwise, I might have done something I'd regret. After that, I decided if our marriage didn't matter to you, why should it matter to me? So I just walked out and found someone else. It was easier to let you keep doing what you were doing than go through a nasty divorce. I got up to leave, but she stopped me. Wait, Robert. Let's get this all out right now. I turned, and she said, the truth is, Robert, I like you, but I don't love you. I did once, but I don't anymore. I've been in love with Dan for years, and he's been asking me to leave you and marry him. Dan? My best friend Dan? I asked. Yes. I kept putting it off, waiting for the right time, but I realize now there's never going to be a perfect time. I'm going to divorce you. I haven't seen a lawyer yet, but when I do, I'll be asking for the house, custody of the girls, and child support. Since I don't work and can't support myself, I'll also want alimony. I expect 2/3 of your savings, 1/3 for me, 1/3 for the girls' college, and half of your CDs. I'll also want a share of your pension and 401k when you retire. That's it? That's all you want? I'm sure the lawyer will have some suggestions. Yeah, I'll bet. Have you told your parents yet? No. Why? Remember, their anniversary party is this Friday. I think you should keep this to yourself until after the party. You're right. I will. Now that we're being honest, you'll need to move your things into the spare bedroom. As long as I'm paying the bills, I'm keeping the master bedroom. With that, I walked away. For the next 2 days, Dolores and I pretty much avoided each other. We went about our routines, barely speaking a word. On Friday morning, just as I was heading out for work, I reminded her I'd be home early. We needed to be ready to leave for her parents' anniversary party by 6. Around lunchtime, I met up with Melissa. I sat her down and told her everything I'd discovered, how long it had been going on, and just how deep the betrayal ran. I handed her a copy of all the evidence the private investigator had given me and asked her to hold on to it, at least until the next day. I'm confronting Dolores tonight, I told her. I don't want your husband tipping her off. After you tell him, let him know I'll be coming after him next, and he'd better be ready. That evening, after making sure the babysitter had all the info she needed, Dolores and I got in the car to head to the party. I noticed her giving me a strange look. What? I asked. It's nothing. I just don't remember ever seeing you put on your seat belt before. I thought you didn't believe in them. I don't, I said. But Tom Baxter got pulled over for a busted tail light, and when the cop saw he wasn't wearing his seat belt, he got hit with another ticket. The light cost him $25, but the seat belt was $125, and his insurance went up after that. I may not like them, but I can't afford those kinds of surprises. Well, I hope you're not expecting me to wear mine. It would wrinkle my dress. Of course not. Wouldn't want that to happen, I said, and she shot me a look as I backed out of the driveway. We rode in silence for a while. Once we were on the interstate, cruising at 75, Dolores broke the quiet. The other night I told you what I wanted, and you just accepted it. You never said what you wanted. I have what I want, Dolores, I said calmly. Oh? And what's that? I glanced at her, then back at the road. I've got my seatbelt on, and I've got the airbag, I said, steering the car deliberately toward the concrete bridge support at high speed. In that split second before everything changed, I caught the look on Dolores's face as she noticed the dashboard light that read passenger airbag off.